All right, welcome back to the End of the Bench podcast. We got myself and Jonathan Slotter as usual. We've been gone for a while because we've been running around catching Pokemon on Pokemon Go, and now the servers are down, so we decided to come to you guys with a podcast. We're going to start by recapping all the divisions and the off seasons for the teams in those divisions. And today we're going to start with the Atlantic Division. We're gonna start with Boston, so as Jonathan says, I can get all my Brad Stevens love out of the way early, and you guys don't have to listen to it somewhere in the middle of the podcast. So we'll talk about who they lost first. They lost Jared Sullinger and Evan Turner, two pretty key pieces in their rotation. Sullinger ended up with the Raptors on a one-year deal, and Turner got paid by the Portland Trailblazers this offseason. They presumably added rookie Jaylen Brown and Al Horford. And that was basically through Danny Ainge's asset gathering over the past few years, a lot of it from Atlantic Division rival Brooklyn Nets, who we'll talk about in a little bit. And a lot of those guys, it seemed like Danny Ainge was hoping to make a bigger splash than he did with all those assets. In the cap space he created, he got Al Horford, who's a huge help. I think Brad Stevens will be able to do a lot with him, but it seemed like they didn't address a lot of the needs that they had, mainly three-point shooting, which really hurt them in the playoffs. What do you think about their offseason that they've had so far?
I'm lukewarm on their offseason. However, I will say that I don't think that their offseason is done. Evan Turner, I think, provided them some valuable minutes and pieces that they don't really have a backup for, or they're going to need some internal growth from guys like Rozier in order to make sure that there's enough, wing or point guard ball handling. A lot's going to be left up to Isaiah Thomas now. I don't think Bradley's capable of it. Hopefully, they're hoping Rozier and Smart make jumps. And then I guess, they're hoping that Jaylen Brown can supplement that. I like the Horford signing, but is it any better than where the Hawks were talent-wise with Horford? I don't really think he can be your best player, and he wasn't the best player on the Hawks this past year.
Right.
And they just got swept by Cleveland, and I don't think this team is anywhere near as talented as that Hawks team was last year. And I don't think that the coaching differential between Stevens and Budenholzer is like so great that, I think it's Stevens is a better coach, but it's a smaller gap than people would surmise. So I don't know. I thought a lot of their draft and stash guys were weird, considering that they're still below the floor for the salary cap minimum. There's still some moves to be made from them, and I'm not exactly sure what they're gonna do. They're the team that I think has, outside of the Nets, because they have so much cap room left. They're the team that they could really shake things up before the season starts, either with Westbrook or, bringing in some other guy.
I think you've really hit it on the head when you said their offseason's not over, because they're kind of playing the long game, right? Danny Ainge, that whole organization, they're going after superstars with all the space and assets that they've gathered. I think that draft room probably thought Jaylen Brown could be one. I'm pretty high on Jaylen Brown. He's fun. He was fun to watch in summer league. He may not have shot the ball well. He may not address that specific need. But player, I think he's a smart basketball player, and he'll be a good fit in a Brad Stevens system. I think he can eventually maybe learn to guard a few positions. Athletic kid. I like Al Horford. I think he'll be a veteran presence in a young team. Someone who's kind of been there before, done that before. Maybe help those guys. Like you said, the Hawks are probably a better version of this team. And they got swept by the Cavs, but it's still a calming presence. I think they probably made their ceiling, second in the East now, because Toronto outperformed predictions last year, and I think they might regress a little bit to the mean this year after their offseason. We'll get to that later. I think Boston, like I said, I think Boston's second. I think you're right. They're playing the slow game. They want superstars. Russell Westbrook's obviously going to be on their radar up to the start of the season, and then all the way through the trade deadline if he doesn't go anywhere. And they'll be looking to make any sort of deal for any sort of disgruntled superstar. Maybe Boogie Cousins in Sacramento stops working again. or something like that, and then they'll reach out to them. They'll be making a lot of calls this year. They've obviously still got assets, but assets are only so much if you don't get a lot done with them. And that we saw that during the draft when they kind of panicked when they couldn't make a trade or move any of them to up their position. They kind of ended up with Jaylen Brown and a whole lot of this. So hopefully they can make something out of it. But for right now, it's looking like they got Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, and a bunch of stash guys.
Yeah. Another thing that I think, Horford plays well in this type of system where he doesn't. In my head, I kind of didn't want them to get Horford because I think the back end of his contract is going to be so bad, and I was kind of hoping they'd go for like a guy like Biyombo who can really be, a rim protector, because they don't really have one. They have some guys, some big guys that can shoot. They don't really have some big guys that protect the rim. But the way that Horford plays fits with what Brad Stevens has made this team a good defensive team because the guards are excellent on the outside, so they don't really need a rim protector. So Horford kind of fits that mold, but I would have liked them to see them get a Biyombo, and then they could have made Smart and Avery Bradley more expendable in trying to sweeten deals for trades. Because if they let go some of their better perimeter defenders, and then you're just left with, in 2 years, a 33-year-old Al Horford to protect the rim, like that's not super great. So, we'll see. And Jay Crowder too, another good perimeter defender. So, I think that stuff like that is we'll see how that works itself out. If we were giving grades, I guess I'd give them a C, but it's really like an incomplete. Like I'm not really sure what, we're just not sure how it's going to end up before the season starts.
We're gonna have to give them an incomplete. I mean, until we see whether they land another superstar. If they land their guy, then eventually they're going to get an A. And if they never land it and they keep building up all these assets for no reason and finishing 4th, 5th, 6th in the East because Brad Stevens is working magic with these sorts of rosters, then it's probably a D minus, D plus, somewhere in there. But time's only going to tell with this team. They might get Russell Westbrook at the trade deadline or something this year, and then run through the East to an Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll have to see. It'll be a long game with them. Let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets. They lost Wayne Ellington, Willie Reed, Thaddeus Young, and Jarrett Jack, who let us know that they had lost him through an emoji tweet. I don't remember exactly what emojis he tweeted after they signed Jeremy Lin, but I remember getting a kick out of it on the internet. Emojis have been very fun the last two free agent periods, especially with the old DeAndre Jordan thing last year. They added Trevor Booker, Justin Hamilton, Jeremy Lin, Luis Scola, Grievous Vasquez, Anthony Bennett, and Randy Foye. No rookies because Boston drafted all their rookies and probably will for like the next 6 years.
Well, they did get they got Karis LeVert.
Oh, that's right. They did get Chris LeVert in a trade. Who I like. I think he's a good basketball player. He had some injury issues at Michigan last year, but he can really shoot it. He's a really good scorer. Seems like they added some talent. I think Randy Foye's a good basketball player. Jeremy Lin's obviously a good basketball player. I know you wanted him in Houston. I was thinking he was going to go there, so I was surprised when he ended up with Brooklyn. He must really love the bright lights in New York City and wanted to get back. But it looks like it's going to be kind of the same old Brooklyn Nets basketball team. Jeremy Lin, Brook Lopez, pick and rolls, pick and pop should be a lot of fun to watch. But outside of that, they should be. I do think they'll be more competitive. They added some real NBA talent as opposed to some guys they've been running out there the last couple of years. But all in all, it's not something that's going to move the needle for them. They still, with the lack of assets that they gave up and those KG and Paul Pierce trades, are going to be playing the long game.
Yeah, I really like what they did this summer. I think I potentially would give them the best grade out of the Atlantic teams. I think they lost Thaddeus Young, they get a pick, and then they signed Trevor Booker. Well, Booker's not – Thaddeus Young's outside game in terms of like his shooting and stuff is a little bit overrated in my opinion. And I think Booker brings a lot of the same things that Thaddeus Young has, and he's on a super reasonable 2-year, $18.5 million contract, and he's probably going to start. I think that Levert is an excellent pairing with Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who's still working on his outside shot. Levert's kind of a guy that can score, and they got two guys that can really penetrate and create for others in Lynn and Vasquez. With Vasquez, it's really like a health thing. On defense, they're probably not going to be great, but I think that they will be a better team. And I think the biggest thing they did is they're so far under the floor now. They're like 25 million below the floor, and then they only have like 36 million on their books for next year, not including team options for Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, Sean Kilpatrick, etc. So I think they have all this cap space. At some point, they're going to get their draft picks back. And I don't know. I like what they did, to be honest. I think that they had a really successful summer, even if the wins aren't there. They probably still will only win like 30 games, but I think that they'll be very much more competitive than last year.
I agree 100%. Competitive basketball team. Celtics fans should be sad. It means they're going to not get as good to draft picks in next year's draft, presumably. And really, it's successful. If you had told me that with this team's cap situation with Joe Johnson a couple years ago would look like this in 2 or 3 years ago, you have to give them an A+ immediately that they've been able to come back from that. And not just to be under the cap this year, but like you said, next year with only 36 on the books. I think the pool of playing in New York City has dimmed some, but you're still going to get meetings with maybe not top tier free agents, but at least second tier guys, and that means something if you can get a couple of those. And they got a lot of cap space going into next summer, so kudos to that front office. They've done a really, really good job clearing that up.
Yep, and obviously Sean Marks, Spurs guy. Everyone kind of thought like he was going into a terrible position, and then all he does is sign guys to like 1-year prove-it deals, or Jeremy Lin and Trevor Booker, like two of the better contracts for this offseason. So I mean, he's really done a remarkable job in a no-win situation. At least that's what it seemed like at the time.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Anytime you can get guys like that on those sorts of deals, it's really a steal. Especially when you see guys like Evan Turner getting 4 years, 72
ridiculous.
million. So those are really good deals for Lynn and Booker. That'll be another podcast where we can talk about that deal a little bit. I guess next we got the Knicks. Knicks lost out on Aflalo, Williams, Calderon, and then traded Jerian Grant and Robin Lopez in the deal with the Bulls. And then they waived Tony Roten. I'm sorry, I know that probably hurts you a little bit. We all love Tony Roten here at End of the Bench podcast.
Yeah.
And then they brought in Derrick Rose, Justin Holiday, some other names that everybody would know. Brandon Jennings, Courtney Lee, Joakim Noah, re-signed Lance Thomas to a reasonable deal, and then Vujicic to a 1-year minimum. As far as getting competitive on the court, they've probably done the best job of anybody improving their status in the Atlantic Division. But unfortunately, they've done it with two guys that have injury issues in Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah. But I really like the Courtney Lee contract. I think that's pretty reasonable. Brandon Jennings, we all know he can play if he's healthy and gets an opportunity, and that's a pretty reasonable deal to take a flyer on Brandon Jennings for a year. But when Phil Jackson took over, it kind of seems like they're going back into the situation they were in before. A lot of guys with high contracts. I know Rose is expiring after this year. It almost seems like they're painting themselves into a corner again, where a lot of money invested in Joakim Noah. He's an old center who's had injury issues, and that could cause problems. Carmelo Anthony's getting the twilight almost of his career, so I guess they're kind of figuring they have to win now. But it kind of seems like they made a lot of panic moves when they should be trying to slow down and wait out some different things that they had going on their roster.
I think I'm a little higher on their offseason than you are. If it really wasn't for the Noah contract, I think I would grade them pretty highly. The thing with Noah and with a lot of these teams is like when you go into a room with someone and there was mutual interest between the two. It's like whenever Mozgov got that deal, it's like, who are you bidding against?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand. It's like you play the Price is Right rules. You give them like one more dollar than like what the other team like is going to offer them, right? Like I don't understand. That
Especially when it's signed on the first day. You know that's the only meeting
yeah,
must.
it's like it's so bizarre, and it's not like other teams are like rushing to like sign. Sheesh. But
It's
it's
okay.
outside of the Noah contract. I like what they did. They're taking a flyer on Rose. If he doesn't work out, fine. If he does, maybe they resign him, maybe they don't. Same with Jennings. They're both like pretty big wild cards that could really pay off. And then, like you said, the Courtney Lee and Lance Thomas deals are all very reasonable. And but their team is taking shape. No, they have a good amount of shooting, and they have a good amount of skill. I kind of like the flow. I think Noah and Porzingis play well together. I think the fact that they didn't really sign a backup center outside of Hernan Gomez means that Porzingis is going to play more at the center, which I like.
Yeah.
Which means probably more mellow at the 4, which I think is also good. And and then they have a great stabilizer and backup point guard, Brandon Jennings. I mean, think about what their point guards were last year. They had Langston Galloway and Calderon, and now they're throwing out Rose and Brandon Jennings. I mean, that's a humongous upgrade.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of what they did. Their cap situation still isn't great. They're over the cap this year. Next year they're going to be maybe they'll have. I mean, they're going to have to team option Porzingis, so I guess maybe they'll have $20 million in cap space, which isn't a ton, given where the market's at now. But
Everybody's going to have max space again next year.
Right. So, well, they said it was only going to go up to 104. Was that or 102? Something like that.
It went from 107 to 104 is what the projection changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they'll have about 20 million, which isn't, but that's a good quality starter.
You can add pieces that way. Yeah.
So I don't think they're in a terrible position, but I mean, if Melo is going to stay and they really aren't going to trade him and he doesn't want to be traded, then you kind of just have to go all in and see what you can do in his last 3 or 4 years, because otherwise you just are going to put him in a situation, with a bunch of rookies, and that's not really a situation that is good for your team, good for the fans, good for the organization.
Yeah, I agree. The Lakers showed you can give your star player their player friendly deal for the last few years of their career and still put yourself in a position to build for the future, and then give all that money to Timothy Mozgov. So they've given the New York Knicks the blueprint for paying Carmelo Anthony for the rest of his career and trying to keep it competitive while still putting themselves in a position to rebuild. I just have to say it because it's incredible to me. I can't believe I'm a Duke fan, so I cannot believe after watching Lance Thomas for 4 years at Duke that he's getting paid $6 million to play basketball in the NBA. That dude has to work so hard every single day because it's really incredible what his game's become. He's always kind of added a reasonable 3-point shot. He plays hard, and that's incredible to me that he's getting paid that much money to play basketball in the NBA.
You're a Duke fan?
I am. I've let that go for a really long time, but I felt like it was time to tell you that today. The only real problem that I have outside of the Joakim Noah contract is that they let Jerry and Grant go. I think Jerry and Grant's going to turn out to be a pretty good basketball player, but like you said, if you're trying to win now, you don't want to surround Melo with a bunch of young guys who probably aren't going to do that. And Derrick Rose is an upgrade over Jerry and Grant, obviously. He was a really good young piece they had, and that was probably, I mean, it's not a tough decision at the end of the day when you can get Derrick Rose, but it's one you don't always want to let go.
Yeah, I don't know if he had a spot on the team really in the rotation. Yeah. I mean, I guess he would have been that third guard, but if you I like him and Langston Galloway are pretty similar, I'd say. And so I think if you think Galloway is gonna be that guy, then he's your third guard. Then Grant, he just didn't really have a spot on the roster, so I don't really mind that. I guess. I mean, other than just asset retention, but
yeah, that's fair. Like I said, I think New York's offseason comes down to, like you said, if Derrick Rose and Brandon Jennings stay healthy, and can provide them with what New York thinks they're going to provide them. And Kristaps Porzingis gets better this offseason, then really they've won. That's all that really matters for them going into this year. And Carmelo Anthony staying healthy during Olympic basketball, obviously. All right, so next we're going to talk about whether or not we can continue to trust the process with Philadelphia 76ers. Landed the first draft pick. The only real loss they had was Ish Smith, who played really well for them last season. He got a $6 million a year deal from the Pistons to presumably go be backup point guard. He's shown in spurts that he can run a team, but I imagine that any point guard can come in and at least score 10 points and dish out 6 or 8 assists for the Philadelphia 76ers at some point. We all know they landed Ben Simmons, number 1 draft pick. A couple guys that, according to reports, have them as draft and stash, and some have them as definitely staying in Philadelphia, so we still don't know yet. And then Dario Saric is coming over this year, which is very exciting for them. He's after they drafted him high in the lottery a couple years ago. And then they signed Jared Bayless, Gerald Henderson, and Sergio Rodriguez to very reasonable deals to kind of give themselves some wing depth, because they've been drafting big men for, it seems like, the past 5 years with their top 5 picks in the draft. I'd give him a pretty decent grade. You got Ben Simmons, who I watched him a few times in Summer League this year. He looked like a solid player. He obviously doesn't trust his jump shot yet, but he's an incredible passer. Some of the lanes he sees out on the court as a big man is really cool. It'd be fun if they went with a Ben Simmons point guard experiment at least a couple times. And I think everything I've seen and heard about Saric, he's going to be a pretty good basketball player. And then, like I said, I like Jared Bayless. He's instant offense. He's a good energy guy. And then Gerald Henderson, I thought improved a lot last year with the Trailblazers. So he should give him something on the wing that they really haven't had the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think this team is interesting at the very least. I still have reservations about Ben Simmons' mentality, I guess.
Yep.
But in the summer league, he looked awesome. I mean, he is way faster than he looked in college, even, and that's crazy. I mean, how LSU didn't win more games? Their coach must be terrible or something, because he was just making passes, and how he transitioned from rebounding to, sprinting out to these fast breaks. It was kind of like Westbrook style, but more fluent and artistic, I guess, is the best.
It seems like it seems like Ben Simmons sees the game 2-3 passes ahead of everybody else. And granted, Summer League, it's a bunch of guys that aren't going to make NBA rosters, but it was still a lot of fun to watch when he was. And then like a cross matchup of him and Larry Nance. Larry Nance was covering him this game, who I consider a fairly mobile, athletic four. Just couldn't keep up with him. He was on another level than Larry Nance athletically, and I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's really fast for his size. He didn't play with the force that like LeBron has, but I'd say speed-wise, they're probably pretty similar. I am interested to see Saric play. They need wings. They've needed outside guys for a while. Covington is a nice piece, and I really think his niche is just going to be a 4 more than a 3. And they've been kind of having to play him at 3. And they still are probably going to have to play him at 3 because the front court's so loaded. But with Simmons, you can have Covington, you can have Jared Bayless playing point guard, which is great because he can at least stay in front of some point guards and then provide some shooting. Saric, has a reliable outside game, and like you said, Gerald Henderson improved from the outside. So I think this team actually has NBA players this year, which is something that the fans want to see. And they didn't jeopardize anything by going out and signing some of these veterans. And so, they're still below the floor this year, and they're still going to have, $50 million in cap next year. So this team is interesting. I think they'll definitely be the most watchable they've been in 5 years.
Oh, I agree 100%. Like they've got a log jam in the front court, especially if Joel Embiid gets healthy at some point. But at least they're putting out a product that has a decent vision now of Hinkies trust the process movement. I hashtag with my fingers in case anybody missed that. Almost seemed like, I mean, like it was just, hopefully we hit a star in the lottery. Hopefully hit a star in the lottery. Hopefully, and they have a bunch of guys that are pretty good basketball players. Nerlens Noel is a good basketball player. Joel Okafor is a good basketball player. Now Ben Simmons, Embiid, if he's healthy, they all play similar positions, and none of them can really shoot the ball that great. But now you've got some wings that are coming in, like you said. Henderson shoots, Bayless shoots, Sarge shoots, and it seems like a real basketball plan is coming into place. And that's exciting. Nobody wants to watch a bunch of guys that should probably be playing in the D League and other organizations out on the court. I mean, good for those guys. They get their shot and making some money while they're playing, but it'll be more fun to get to watch them play and grow and develop as a team and a unit with some veteran guys helping the younger guys on the roster.
Yeah, and I think that while you're probably going to have to sacrifice some value if they end up having to move, I think they will have to move one of Noel or Okafor, and most probably Noel, because he's just more dynamic in terms of what he can, or he can fit into more schemes than Okafor can, who you really have to kind of plan your offense around.
I think Noel will bring a higher return and trade value too.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I don't think you're going to get full value for him. But with him, you can definitely add a good wing or a good point guard, or something that you can see how your team is taking shape now, and you kind of have that asset in your back pocket to help you, have a more complete team. So I think that this team will probably make a move either before the season starts, or Noel will get traded at the deadline or something like that. It may be in like some sort of 3-team deal that brings them back a draft pick or something like that. But I think that they're at least heading in the right direction, and I think Hinkie put them in the right direction. It's unfortunate that he won't get to reap the benefit of what he was trying to do.
I can 100% see Boston calling about Nerlens Noel later in the year, whoever they make available, if it's Okafor or Noel. That he give him that rim protector, the athletic big to maybe pair with Horford, and then you could have shooting off the bench and Trebko or whatever. But I like Noel. I remember it was 2 years ago, post All-Star break. I saw a graph, and it was blocks plus steals post All-Star break. And there was everybody else over here on the left side, and then way off in the upper, like Anthony Davis and Nerlens Noel. And Anthony Davis was there because he was averaging like 3.5 blocks per game. But Noel was like 2.5 blocks and 2.5 steals. And I was like, wow, this kid's going to be tough. And then, it's tough when you have to be you're a 20-year-old kid and you have to be the best player on your basketball team on a team with not a lot of talent. But he's got a lot of potential. And if they do move him, I think you're right. They'll get something, at least a good piece for him. Hopefully a wing, because that's really what they need. But they got some options. Like you said, they got options. They're way below the salary floor. If they keep adding pieces that are usable in the future, then they could definitely attract some free agents who would want to grow with that team, maybe some younger guys, because they'll have a lot of space to offer.
Absolutely.
So last we got in the Atlantic Division, we got the Toronto Raptors, who lost 4-2 to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference playoffs. They lost Bismack Biyombo, Scola, and James Johnson. Added Podol, center from Utah. Jared Solinger on a 1-year deal. DeMar DeRozan on a supermax deal. And they've recently signed Fred VanVleet, who neither one of us think will probably make the team, to a minimum deal, multi-year deal. Probably spend some time in the D League, maybe a couple call-ups. They're probably in the most precarious cap situation, except for maybe the Knicks, in the Atlantic Division as well, especially with the new DeMar DeRozan deal. Letting Biyombo go is going to cause him some problems. I felt like he unlocked a lot of things for him in the playoffs this past run, helped him out a lot. James Johnson showed promise from time to time, but ultimately he didn't factor in a lot in their latest postseason run. And you can replace the Luis Scola, and they did that with Jared Solinger, which is a big guy who already found the basketball and shoots a little bit. So that was fine there. I'm not a big fan of you got to pay to keep your guys. and there was obviously mutual interest for them to keep him there, and he wanted to be in Toronto. So good for him. I think they probably reached their ceiling last year unless somebody makes a monumental leap. And I think that guy was probably Biombo, to be honest with you, that they let go. But I think they'll be solid. They'll compete for a top 4 spot in the East again, and hopefully make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think what scares me the most about Toronto for them is that while I'm not sure, in theory, Biombo probably wasn't going to get to play as much, but Valanciunas is just so injury prone, and now the backup is, Jacob Poeltl, who I think him and Valanciunas are kind of similar, but he's just not nearly the athlete that Valanciunas is.
Yeah.
And so, he's kind of a little bit of a prodding, he's got a fair face-up game. He's had a good post-up game in college, but it's tough to tell because you're not playing against 7-footers in college. And so I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of that draft pick. And then, the DeRozan deal, it's interesting. I understand that you want to seem like you're loyal to your guys, but I feel like they could have offered him like a 5-year deal, maybe for like 124, or save some of that money that over the long run, where it's not the complete max, but he's still like substantially more than he could get for a 4-year deal, with
right.
especially because he didn't have a ton of suitors. It's not like a lot of teams were out there looking to add him. So I do think this team can be a little bit better. Maybe not. Maybe their record won't be better, but maybe they're more sustainable. If DeMarre Carroll will be there healthy all year, he's going to bring a lot, and he can play. They can play small ball 4. Norman Powell played really well in the playoffs. He's going to get more run. They say Terrence Ross is really working on his game this summer.
I hear that every year about Terrence Ross.
Right. So maybe he figured it out. Maybe he hasn't. You don't know. So they have some opportunities for internal growth.
Yeah.
It's not super likely, but they do have some opportunities. But I'm kind of with you. They probably would get my worst grade of the group. I think that because they're with their cap situation, they're going to be near the cap. They're near the next 2 years. They're $98 million next year, and then $94 million in 2018. That's not including any of their rookie options. So
right.
they're just going to be capped out, and this is your team, and they'll be competitive and they'll fight hard and they'll represent the city well. But you're probably right that they're not going to make it to another Eastern Conference Finals. The good thing is, though, the East didn't drastically improve this offseason. You could really say it got worse with Miami, declining most likely, unless Dragic and Whiteside just go off in a up and down offense or something like that. But so the good thing is there's not a lot of teams that are really going to challenge Cleveland, and so maybe they can find their way back there. But they probably did max out with what they did last year, and that's fine and that's good. And it's good to see that Toronto is relevant because their fans are really awesome.
Yeah. On something that's really important with Toronto because they're capped out. They do have a lot of young guys that can continue to get better, and they're off season almost every year from now until some of these bigger contracts go off the books. There's going to be internal improvement. We hear Terrence Ross every year. He's gotten better at shooting. He handling the ball better. Same stuff I hear about Harrison Barnes and Golden State that never happened. But hopefully, but that's something that's got to happen for them to get to another level. Terrence Ross has to get a lot better. Norman Powell showed a lot of flashes last year. Really like his game. If he's in the gym working all the time, him getting better can really help him. I think Valanciunas can still. He's really good when he's healthy. He's a really, really good center in the NBA. Like you said, he's an athletic guy. He protects the rim relatively well, but he's got to stay healthy. And then DeMarre Carroll coming back is going to help him a lot. That's going to give him it's going to be another year of continuity. So a lot of their offseason now is dependent on internal improvement and better team chemistry, and these guys getting to play with DeMarre Carroll for another year because they've been together for a really long time. I like Jared Sullinger. I think that is an upgrade. Him over Luis Scola is absolutely an upgrade. He's a better shooter, and they were trying to use Scola to stretch the floor last year, and he did that to the best of his abilities and pretty admirably for what I expected Luis Scola to be able to do as a floor stretching four. Jared Sullinger is better at that. He's a good rebounder, but he's undersized defensively. But he's dealt with that in Boston, and Boston's had when he's been on the floor the past couple of years, so they might be able to scheme some around that. But so Toronto's going to be a playoff team. They're going to be fun to watch for the next at least 4 or 5 years, as long as they keep DeRozan and Lowry around. Those guys like playing together. I remember the first thing I saw about free agency was Timothy Mozgov. The second thing I saw was Kyle Lowry's Instagram picture of him and DeMar DeRozan congratulating him on the deal and telling him he's never buying dinner again. I think is something that Lowry's making $12 million a year, and DeMar just got the super max. So you can tell those guys love each other, and there's no animosity there. Lowry doesn't care that he's not making what DeRozan makes. So they'll be fun to watch continuously. And I guess if what you want to put out on the basketball court is a good product, then that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think the Sullinger point is actually really good. And I think he's an upgrade over Scola, not only because he's obviously just better basketball player at this point, but he's more versatile where he can play center and they can go small with him. And like you said, he's not a good defender, but when you have guys like Carroll and Powell and Lowry and Corey Joseph to kind of surround him with, you can kind of mask that. And, I understand he's on a prove it. He's trusting himself that he can get a better deal out there. But I kind of hope he stays there because I think now, the more I think about it now, I think he really has a niche with this team that, Patrick Patterson's been so unreliable. They've been shuffling through these fours so much. And, I think he can really provide a really solid third big man rotation guy going forward. Because we all pined for them to start Patrick Patterson, and then he didn't really do anything with it. After he got it, and so he's probably going to start this year. But I think that Sullinger is just going to end up being better than Patterson. If he comes in shape. And if he, does the things that he's capable of doing, because I do think he has higher potential to be a better player than Patterson for them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. He's an excellent rebounder. He's turned into a really good 3-point shooter. And I think your point with Patterson is really good. He's really, really on, or he's really, really off, and that's tough to trust, especially once you get into a 7-game playoff series where outside of Cleveland, most of the East is going to be pretty even this year, I think, for the rest of the playoff teams. So it's really important to have some reliability. And Sullinger, I think, for his deficiencies on defense, they can make up for that in the guards. He's going to give him something on the glass and offensively.
Yep.
So I think that's it for the Atlantic Division. I stayed away from Brad Stevens' hot takes. They wanted to fire. I had them all in my head ready to go, but I stayed away from them as much as possible. We'll be back next time with the Central Division and do a breakdown there of all the off seasons.
Southeast.
You gonna do Southeast then Central?
Yeah. Well, it's on the East Coast.
Well, yeah, that's true. We'll go down the coast. And we'll just do a sine wave all the way across the country and give you everything you want to know about the NBA offseason. All right, later, man.
See ya.